everyone, this is Greyshot151 here of Greyshot Productions, and today I bring to you the start of a new series on Greyshot Productions, a What If series. As a history major, I've always wanted to dive into the what ifs of history, changing small events and seeing the ramifications over the timeline. And today I start this with one that I've been thinking about for a long time. What if Austria joined the Crimean War? So, what would happen in this timeline? Well, disaster, but a fun disaster to think about. So a bit of history first. Europe in 1848 is undergoing a bit of a rebellious phase. More fire and brimstone, less heavy metal. Austria is no exception as Hungarian revolutionaries defeat the army in numerous engagements and threaten the collapse of the entire nation. Franz Joseph I, desperate to maintain power, called upon Russia to crush the rebels, and Nicholas I of Russia agreed. A mountain of dead, and 5 years later, Nicholas I wished to call upon that debt with war. See, in 1853, Russia wished to permanently pull the plug on the Ottoman Empire. This conflict quickly escalated with Russia on one side and the other the standing armies of the Ottomans, British and French. The British and French empires entered to keep stability in Eastern Europe, wishing the Ottomans to remain as a buffer against Russian expansion. In our own timeline, Austria refused mainly due to instability and their own interest in the Balkans, but what if they joined? So let's say in this alternate world, Franz Joseph I has some territorial ambitions he lays out, Nicholas I agrees, and Austria therefore joins the war on the side of Russia. With the Austrians' introduction to the war, Franz Joseph then proceeds to take his nation and fall flat on his face. What, did you think this was going to be an Austria does well video? Oh no. No. In 1853, Austria wouldn't be in a position to push far outside its territory. Excursions to the border regions of the Balkans could be feasible, but instability would keep the army close, especially with a western corridor that borders Sardinia, ally of France, and a northern border that the Prussians wouldn't mind pressing if things get dire. Assisting Russia with the defense of the Crimea would be near impossible. Winning against the French Sardinian forces in the western corridor would also prove fleeting for Joseph, so after 2 years of fighting, the end result wouldn't change all that much. Britain, France, the Ottomans, and Sardinia would eventually win the war. Shocking, I know. Austrian forces in our world lost to France a few years after the Crimean War. Turning up the timetable, making Austria weaker politically and economically, wouldn't change the dynamic in regards to the battles. Sardinia might press for some small territorial reward in the Italian peninsula after the war's conclusion, but the peace negotiations of our time focused on a balance in Europe. Moldavia and Wallachia forming, Russia respecting Ottoman borders, etc. Remember, the whole reason France and Britain joined this war was to keep stability in Eastern Europe. Ruining Austria with debt or breaking it apart would be counterproductive at this point. The other main points of divergence I could see would be in Austria in a far more unstable position, Britain taking the lead in the invasion of Crimea, likely resulting in more casualties for their forces, and Napoleon III's reputation coming off better with the defeat of Austria and Russia. So Austria is on shaky ground to say the least. So what changed by them joining the Crimean War? Well, Russo-Austrian relations. Without the break by denying Russia's call, there wouldn't be a serious strain on their relationship like there was in our own timeline in the 19th century. Tension will still present itself on the ground of nationalism, religion, and claims, but their alliance, or at least relations, won't shatter. It actually may cause the inverse. In a weaker position, Austria would be open to outside interference, but I doubt any would capitalize it to its fullest. After the Crimean War, the death of Nicholas I, Alexander II's main goal was to focus inward and reform Russia economically and militarily. He moved to keep Russia out of foreign wars, and exerting influence on a weakened Austria to transfer it into a puppet wouldn't align with Alexander's mostly inward policies. France, Britain, and the Ottomans wouldn't push the Austrian spheres of influence for fear-provoking Russia, allowing Joseph to stabilize his country over the following decade. Would reforms maybe occur because of a weaker Austria? Maybe, but Franz Joseph wasn't one to really give his people rights. Maximilian would probably stress some reforms, Maximilian being his brother, but I doubt you would see them take place unless they really focused on strengthening the country as a whole, not so much its people. Italian unification, or Sardinian conquest of Italy, whichever you prefer, would be accelerated in this timeline by the territory Sardinia seized in the Crimean War. In our own world's timeline, the French and Italians fought the Austrians to claim this territory in 1859, but with the threat of another war with Russia, I doubt this would occur. French-Austrian relations may actually improve to the point where there's open, friendly dialogue between the two nations. This friendly relation would definitely put a damper on any Sardinian hopes of getting France in on the action in case Russia were to intercede. However, a war still would occur, in part thanks to one very cunning politician, Otto von Bismarck. With Bismarck at the helm of politics in Prussia, I could imagine a political move on his part to goad the Austrians into an offensive war against Prussia in the early 1860s. Not appearing at the Austrian-led German conference could be the start of a long series of political games to move Franz Joseph into a war without Russia. With his country stable and his military untested for nearly a decade, Joseph would probably accept this gamble only to fall flat on his face yet again, the second worst decision of his life so far. The Third War of Italian Independence and the Austro-Prussian Wars would be one war in this timeline, with Prussia and Sardinia proving the victors in the end. Napoleon III would move to settle tensions, Bismarck would have his Northern Confederacy, and Sardinia would nearly complete its Italian unification. On the note of Russia, Alexander I wouldn't drag his empire into a war Austria started, especially since Austrian influence and territorial loss didn't border his country. Couple this with Bismarck's political mastery and desire to please Russia, I believe Austria would be forced to accept its blunder on the political stage of Europe. Hungarian demands for more power would definitely occur, but with Russia at its back, I can't see them gaining all that much. I could see some concessions forming, but not enough to make it the equal split of the Austro-Hungarian power that we saw in our own timeline. Now the stage would be set for Prussia's next target, France. Bismarck was a man of patience and political maneuvering. Even if he acquired his German Confederacy earlier, he needed France as the aggressor in the upcoming conflict. A situation like the succession of Spain wouldn't occur frequently, so this event would most likely initiate the conflict again. Prussia makes an offer, France gets mad, Bismarck says a few things, Napoleon III declares war, and Prussia declares victory. Alsace-Lorraine is taken, Germany is unified, and Bismarck achieves his goal of German unification, but as the years begin to pass, a new problem begins to dawn. See, in our own timeline, Bismarck focused on an alliance with Russia because he feared a Franco-Russo alliance. But now, with the French foreign policy based on alienating Germany, French sympathies may extend to Austria, as both would have shared a relatively recent common foe, and personally have no territorial ambitions against the other at this time. Realizing this, Bismarck would move to establish increased relations with Britain in case his alliance with Russia were to ever falter. Nothing obvious, as I believe a good relation would still maintain between the three empires, but nuanced measures would occur to keep Britain at the very least neutral to German interests, culminating in the Berlin Conference of 1883. To sway the British, I believe Bismarck would lessen the colonies under Germany's control by a considerable amount, and ensure the naval buildup of Germany did not occur to the extent it did in our own timeline. The Berlin Conference would be the definite statement of this, allowing most likely the French further territory in Africa and Asia to cause tension with the British. To the British, Germany would appear the smaller threat compared to France, at least in regard to its colonial empire. Wilhelm II, of course, would be furious at this development, as he wanted to emulate the British, so he would remove Bismarck from office, allowing the three emperors' alliance or good relations to falter, playing into Bismarck's fears as Franco-Russian relations improve into alliance in the late 1880s. At this point, Britain would have a choice to make: ally itself with a growing power, or keep good relations with France and Russia, but at the cost of European stability and a growing, threatening sphere of influence against its colonies. With its colonies threatened and Germany's lessened naval and colonial resources, I believe Britain would turn to Germany for an alliance, souring relations with the French. French diplomats would try to sway British reports away from Germany, but as the years progress and territorial spats occur in Africa, French sympathies for Britain would vacate. At the turn of the 20th century, a loose German-British alliance barely holds on, while animosity grows in the French-Austrian-Russian alliance. But in any case, guys, that is going to be the video for today. This is part one of what most likely will be a 3-part series. I've enjoyed writing this, and I've liked diving into every single country and their relations with each other. So if you guys enjoyed this, please let me know in the comments. If you guys have any new ideas, also let me know. I'm thinking about doing maybe one-offs, not as grand as these 3-parters, but maybe just a one-off here and there after this series is done. But in any case, this has been Greyshot151, and I will see you next time in part 2. Later.
Hello everyone, I want to give a special shout out to Patreon supporters Milam, Ace, Chris Bailey, Javi, Jfoe, Joey240, Josh, JP Vaal, jrchicklis, Little Koosh, Moustache, Onlyplayapples, PyroShark, Rifle, Sebastian, Marszalek, Sergeant McPain, Streakingwookie, WhiteHodD, GTA, Jakub, Ocwieja, Nathan, Angus, and of course Tim. Thank you guys so much for your amazing support. This has been Greyshot17 and my amazing patrons, and I'll see you guys next time.